Good afternoon, I hope everyone's well today. Thank you for watching, it is appreciated as always. And we've had some good news this week, and I want to call attention to a parliamentarian called Nick Timothy, who is a Conservative. Don't unsubscribe, but he is a good Conservative, he does seem to be one of the good ones, there is a few. So I'm going to bring up this image first of all. Labour tears up Islamophobia definition. The party adopts new wording to define anti-Muslim hate. There is a distinction there, alright, and it's an important distinction which we'll get into. Labour has torn up its definition of Islamophobia amid fears it could threaten free speech. The party working group has now drawn up wording that will replace the controversial definition adopted in 2019, substituting the term Islamophobia with anti-Muslim hate. There is a difference there. Now, the difference is Islamophobia means that you're afraid of a religion. Now, and the phobia part of the definition implies that the fear is irrational. I don't subscribe to that either. Fear of sharks is irrational, alright? Fear of the religion of peace isn't irrational. It's a rational fear. So the actual phrase Islamophobia doesn't actually hold any water. And then you look at the anti-Muslim hate, that's a broader context, which means that critique of Islam, just like critique of Hinduism or Christianity, is permitted and is not a crime. And the reason why they've had to backpedal on this is because there is a bill going through Parliament. Many people may not be aware of it, but the bill going through Parliament currently is the Freedom of Expression, brackets, Religion or Belief System Bill. This essentially is an amendment because there's a Public Order Act that was brought in the 1980s to legislate against hooliganism, football hooliganism, and it's been applied in context for which it was never intended, which is when we're getting these large plasticine marches all over the country, and they are using it to quell dissent of dissenters to the religion of peace. So essentially it's being used as a blasphemy law by the back door. This is why Labour has not brought their definition of Islamophobia into law, because there's good parliamentarians like in Reform UK, independents like Rupert Lowe, and some base Tories that are actually making sure that that doesn't happen, which is a welcome development. Now, when you look at a recent case, and maybe paraphrasing here, but there was a guy outside a Turkish embassy burning a Quran. This prompted an individual from inside the embassy to come out and get a little knife happy with the person that was causing him alarm and distress. So I'm going to read a bit of this case now, because this guy, who was convicted of an aggravated offence, I believe, he's had his appeal win, and he's actually had that judgment quashed, that conviction quashed, which is good. I'm going to read out what happened here. A man who was fined for burning a copy of the Quran outside a Turkish consulate in London has won his appeal against his conviction. Hamit Koskun, 51, shouted abusive comments about Islam as he held a flaming book aloft in Rutland Gardens, Knightsbridge, on the 13th of February. In June, he was found guilty at Westminster Magistrates' Court for religiously aggravated public order offence and fined £240. At Suffolk Crown Court on Friday, the Justice Banathan and said that while burning the Quran may be something that many Muslims find desperately upsetting and offensive, cry me a river, test Jesus, don't test me, the right for freedom of expression must include the right to express views that offend or shock or disturb. Completely agree. In order to have a free and open dialogue, you need to risk being offensive. That's just a principle. Everyone should be on board with that. Sticks and stones may break your bones. Words will never hurt you. It's one of the first things we're taught in primary school, for God's sake. What a bunch of pansies. And we'll continue. Okay, the judge said, we all live in a liberal democracy. One of the precious rights that affords us is the freedom to express our own views, read, hear and consider ideas without the state intervening to stop us doing so. The price we pay for having to allow others to exercise the same rights, even if that upsets, offends or shocks us. The Turkish-born Mr. Koskun said that he had come to England to be able to speak freely about the dangers of radical Islam, and was now reassured that despite many troubling developments, I will now be free to educate the British public about my beliefs. During Mr. Koskun's Quran burning protest, a man emerged from a nearby building and slashed at him with a large knife, telling the police that he was protecting his religion. No, not acceptable. If you think that sort of barbarism is going to be tolerated in the United Kingdom, think again. You should leave right now. What value are you adding? None. You're nothing but a detriment. Okay, let's have a look now. Mr. Koskun's appeal hearing was attended by Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, and said that while he did not agree with what Mr. Koskun had done, he did not believe it was a crime. So we'll leave that one there. This is the backdrop. The laws that were brought in the 80s, the public order offences, are being used beyond their remit and not as intended. This is the difficulty you have when you have broad legislation that's not specific. It's the same thing with the genies in all the stories. The reason why they abuse the wishes is because the wisher is never specific. It's the same with the legislation. Alright, I know that's a bit of a shoddy analogy. It's the same principle. When you're penning something into law, it needs to be precise and it needs to be specific. Which is why I'm going to play a clip in a minute or two. There's like a clarification. That's what this bill here, let's have a look now. Freedom of expression, religion or belief system bill. That is a clarification of overreach that the authorities are using on the public order offences in the 80s. Alright? So we're going to play this clip now. I'm going to get this sorted.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about freedom of expression in relation to religion or belief systems and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do not believe that Muhammad was a prophet sent by God. I do not accept the instructions he said he received from the Archangel Gabriel. I do not accept that the sunnah, or body of Islamic laws, has any relevance to me. I respect the religious beliefs of others, but I do not mind if Muhammad is satirized, criticized, or mocked. I'm not a Muslim, and I choose not to live by the moral codes set out by Islam. I'm a Christian, and I should make clear that I don't think anybody should be prosecuted for satirizing, criticizing, or mocking Jesus either. England and Wales abolished blasphemy laws in 2008, and Scotland abolished them in 2021. But even then, those laws had not been used for decades. The last blasphemy trial took place in 1977, and the state hasn't brought a public prosecution for blasphemy in more than a century. But now blasphemy laws are back. I've been advised not to refer to two high-profile cases of people being arrested, charged and prosecuted for causing harassment, alarm or distress to Muslims or even nonsensically to Islam itself. So while I will keep my speech to the conceptual, I invite the House to recall that there are real examples of what I raise in the criminal justice system right now. The issue is the way sections 4 and 5 of the Public Order Act 1986 are being used, far beyond the intent of Parliament, to police what we can and cannot say about Islam. I will come to the details of sections 4 and 5, but first I want to say something about the intent of the Public Order Act. The long title of the Act makes clear its purpose was to abolish some common law and statutory offences, to make way for new offences relating to public order. Nowhere in the second reading debate from 1986 did anybody raise the need to protect religions or followers of religions from offence. The context of the Act was football hooliganism and the riots in Brixton and Broadwater Farm. It's true that Part 3 of the Act created new offences relating to racial hatred, and this was amended to include religious hatred by the Racial and Religious Hatred Act 2006. But in Part 3, in Section 29J, to which we will return, the Public Order Act says, "Nothing in this part shall be read or given effect in a way which prohibits or restricts discussion, criticism or expressions of antipathy, dislike, ridicule, insult or abuse of particular religions or the beliefs or practices of their adherents." We can therefore be confident that the Public Order Act, even as amended, was never intended to become a blasphemy law. This obvious conclusion is reinforced by the fact that the controversies regarding blasphemy and Islam in this country began 2 years after its introduction, in 1988, with the publication of the Satanic Verses. Since that year, and the protests and fatwa against Sir Salman Rushdie, our public conversation about Islam has been limited through a mixture of self-censorship and more official restrictions, such as the definition of Islamophobia accepted by many public bodies. These restrictions are motivated not by a desire to avoid offence, consider the criticism and mockery made of other religions, but fear of a violent response by those who are offended. Some say public order offences are not the same as a blasphemy law, and that it can be legitimate to prosecute somebody for saying something that might cause wider disorder. Perhaps in some circumstances, this may be so. But we should interrogate this line of thinking. First, the Crown Prosecution Service gave the game away by charging one man with causing distress to the religious institution of Islam, which is pretty much the dictionary definition of blasphemy. The second, twisting the law to make a protester responsible for the violent reaction of those who will not tolerate the opinions of others, is wrong. It destroys our freedom of speech. Some argue that while this may be regrettable, it's now an unavoidable consequence of the multicultural society in which we live today. By this logic, the state must police the boundaries between different ethnic and religious groups to avoid disorder. But we should be clear that this means state intrusion and a loss of liberty on some occasions, and mob rule on others.
It also means, just to clarify context, that the multicultural society utopia that our elites are trying to bring in for us is folly. We're nowhere near the saturation points where the different religions and races that are being brought into the United Kingdom are competing with the native indigenous population directly in terms of numbers. So if this multicultural experiment progresses to its logical conclusion, then all of this that we're having now between the ebb and flow and the intrusion of these states into these disputes between Christians, Protestants and Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims because of the offence that's caused to the religion of peace. How bad is it going to get? How bad is it going to get? The public order offence, as Nick Timothy rightly says, was never intended for this purpose. This is why this bill is being brought in for clarification. So the police, when you see these pro-Palestine marches or pro-Palestine marches, however you want to refer to them, people can mock and ridicule Islam, of course. People can mock and ridicule the Christian faith, the Catholic or the Protestants. We don't care. My belief system is secure. Test Jesus, don't test me. And it should be the same for everybody in the country. My religion doesn't require other people not to offend me. My religion doesn't require other people to bow down to my religion. And my religion is the dominant religion in the United Kingdom. It may not be the majority view currently, but it is making a comeback, and that's important. The police are basically using these powers, the public order offence powers. They're doing it just to stop kick-offs. That's all they're doing it for. They're not actually applying the law the way it was intended, which is why clarification like this bill that's going through Parliament currently is welcome. So, while I'm not a Tory voter, I do have conservative leanings, and I welcome this. Nick Timothy is a really impressive politician in his own terms.
This is the very essence of the two-tier policing row we have seen recently. Rough justice for those belonging to identity groups that play by the rules, and freedom from justice for those belonging to groups willing to take to the streets and threaten violence.
Completely agree, and that's what needs to be stopped. It needs to be a level playing field for everybody, regardless of religion or race.
This is the logic of using the Public Order Act to prohibit us from saying what we like about a religion. A person may be found guilty because of the violent reaction of those offended by their actions. From Sir Salman Rushdie to the Batley teacher still in hiding with his family, the threat of violence is what lies behind these new blasphemy laws. Perhaps we should not be surprised. There are at least 14 Muslim-majority countries where the penalty for blasphemy or apostasy is death, and we have significant diaspora populations from many of them. With the number of people here who came from these countries growing, and the increasing assertiveness of organised political Islam in Britain, This is a problem that seems likely to only get more severe.
I would go further than Nick Timothy here. I would say if you don't adhere to our cultural standards and norms, meaning we're going to mock Islam, just like we mock Christianity, if you can't deal with that, if that offends your sensitive mindsets, we'll purchase you a one-way ticket back. We're not having Islamic State in Britain. It's just not going to happen.
But the answer is not to surrender to the mob. It is to hold the line, and that is why today I bring forward this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, I said earlier that Section 29J of the Public Order Act protects criticism, insult, and even abuse of religions and the beliefs and practices of their adherents. But this only applies to Part 3 of the legislation, because Part 3 introduced offences relating to racial hatred, later amended to include religious hatred. Nobody thought Sections 4 and 5, which in Part 1 of the Act make it an offence to cause harassment, alarm or distress by using threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour, would be used to criminalise the expression of opinion about religious belief. This bill therefore extends the scope of 29J to the whole of the Public Order Act, thus preventing the use of Sections 4 and 5 as a de facto blasphemy law.
Well, that's the thing. They say that, or the guy that was prosecuted earlier this year for burning his own Quran in public, which caused alarm and offence, which was the basis of the prosecution. And burn a Bible in public, I don't care. That doesn't mean I'm going to get stab happy because you're upsetting me. Nah, that's not the way it should work, and that's the way it did work. Okay, and that's what I've got major issues with, and I'm sure many people agree.
And applies Section 29 also to Section 127 of the Communications Act 2003 and Section 1 of the Malicious Communications Act 1988. In doing so, this bill would restore free speech as it applies to religion in England and Wales. It would stop the police, prosecutors and judges from creating a blasphemy law from legislation that was never passed for that purpose. It would send the strongest powerful message from this place, where political power legitimately and democratically resides, that this country will not tolerate intimidation, violence or censorship, that there will be no special treatment here for Islam, and there will be no surrender to the thugs who want to impose their beliefs and culture on the rest of us.
Yeah. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many in that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. John Cooper, Luke Evans, Richard Holden, Robert Jenrick, Rupert Lowe, Rebecca Paul, Jack Rankin, Alex Shelbrook, Bradley Thomas, Tom Tugendhat, Gavin Williamson, and me.
Nick Timothy. Many bows. Bonus one.
Freedom of expression, religion or belief system bill.
Second reading what day?
The 11th of July.
So there you have it. My personal opinion is all of this is welcome. We shouldn't be prosecuted for offending any religion, and we need to guard our freedoms for expression and make sure that we're not taken over by alien cultures. All of this is a welcome development from Nick Timothy, this bill in Parliament, and the appeals that people are winning against the religion of peace in the United Kingdom. Now, if the Islamist MPs that have recently been elected have any issue with this, have issue with it, cry me a river, deport yourself, go to a country that is more in line with your way of thinking. That would be my suggestion. As always, if you like this video, give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video later on today. Have a good day, and thanks again.